In the late 1960s, John Wayne quietly changed a teenage boy's future, and then never mentioned it. Not to the press, not to his co-stars, not even to his own family. The story only surfaced after Wayne was gone, and when it did, it reframed everything people thought they knew about the man. Here's how it started. An ordinary evening. Wayne's home in Encino, California. His housekeeper's teenage son was in the hallway, duffel bag in hand, finished with school, ready to disappear into whatever work he could find. Wayne could have walked past. The boy wasn't his responsibility. Intervening meant money, time, and years of showing up quietly for someone the world would never notice. But doing nothing meant watching a kid throw away the only chance he'd ever get. He had maybe 60 seconds to decide. What he chose that evening quietly cost him thousands, and gave Roberto something no paycheck ever could. We found the proof. It's been sitting in a shoebox for decades, and it changes the whole story. John Wayne was one of the most recognizable men on the planet. By the mid-1960s, he had made over 100 films. He had an Oscar. He had a ranch in Arizona, a yacht named the Wild Goose, and a home in Encino, California that reflected every inch of the legend he'd become. But inside that house, the person who kept things running wasn't a publicist or a studio assistant. It was Consuelo, a quiet, dignified woman who had worked for the Wayne household for years. She cooked. She cleaned. She kept the rhythm of the house steady on the days Wayne came home exhausted from a shoot, and the days he left before sunrise. She didn't ask for recognition. She just showed up. And Wayne noticed. Not in a showy way. That wasn't how he operated. But staff who worked alongside Consuelo during those years later recalled that Wayne treated her differently than most employers treated household help in that era. He remembered her children's names. He asked about her family when he came home. When she was sick one winter and missed nearly 2 weeks of work, Wayne continued paying her. No questions asked, no hours docked. He wasn't performing kindness. One family friend recalled years later. He just didn't see a reason not to be decent. Over time, Consuelo's son Roberto became a quiet fixture around the property, helping out after school, running small errands, growing up in the background of a life that looked nothing like the one waiting for him outside those gates. He was bright, observant, the kind of kid who watched everything and said little. Wayne noticed that too. By the mid-1960s, Roberto was a teenager, and the world he was navigating looked nothing like the one Wayne had grown up in, and nothing like the one his mother worked inside every day. The financial pressure on Consuelo's family was real and constant. School was a luxury that competed with rent, with food, with the basic math of survival. Roberto had watched his mother work herself to the bone for years. He was old enough now to do something about it. In the spring of 1967, Consuelo mentioned something to Wayne, casually, the way you mention something you've already half accepted. Roberto was thinking about leaving school. There was work available. It made sense, she said. It was practical. Wayne didn't respond right away. He just nodded. But that evening, according to a family member who later spoke about it, Wayne walked past the back hallway and saw something that stopped him cold. A duffel bag, packed, sitting by the door. Roberto was standing nearby, not making eye contact. The decision had already been made, or so the boy thought. Wayne looked at the bag. Then he looked at the boy, and something shifted. It was a Thursday evening in the spring of 1967. The Encino house was quiet. Consuelo had finished her shift and was gathering her things. Roberto was in the hallway, duffel bag at his feet, jacket on. He wasn't running away. He wasn't angry. He was just done with school, with the idea that patience would eventually pay off, with the version of the future his mother kept describing that never seemed to get any closer. He was 16 years old, and he had already done the math. Wayne stepped into the hallway and stopped. He looked at the bag. He looked at Roberto. He asked one question, simple, direct, the way Wayne always spoke. "Where are you going?" Roberto told him. There was work in the fields outside the city. Seasonal, physical, immediate. It paid. School didn't. Not yet. Not any way the family could afford to wait for. His mother had given enough. It was his turn. According to a family member who later recounted the exchange, Wayne didn't argue. He didn't lecture. He just stood there for a long moment. The kind of silence that people who knew him said meant he was thinking. really thinking, not just waiting for his turn to talk. Then he said, "Give me a week." Roberto didn't understand what that meant. Neither did Consuelo, who had appeared in the doorway behind her son. Wayne didn't explain. He just asked the boy to wait 1 week before making any final decision. That was all. What happened in that week is where the story gets complicated. Wayne made calls, quietly, without involving his publicist or his studio contacts or anyone who might turn it into a headline. He reached out to a private school in the Los Angeles area, one with a strong academic track record and, more importantly, a financial aid structure that could be worked with. He asked about tuition. He asked about enrollment timelines. He asked what it would take. The number he got back wasn't small. For a man of Wayne's wealth, it wasn't ruinous, but it was significant. And more than the money, it was the commitment. This wasn't a one-time check. Keeping Roberto in school meant ongoing tuition, supplies, transportation. It meant years, not months. It meant attaching himself, quietly, privately, to the outcome of a teenager's life, with no guarantee of anything in return. He could have written a smaller check and called it generosity. He could have had Consuelo direct the boy to a public assistance program and considered his conscience clear. But Wayne had already decided. The week wasn't for him to think it over. The week was to get everything in place before Roberto could say no. By the following Thursday, Wayne had a folder on his desk. Enrollment paperwork, a tuition arrangement, a start date. He called Roberto in and put it on the table. Roberto walked into the room expecting a conversation. What he got was a decision that had already been made, on his behalf, by a man who had no obligation to make it. Wayne slid the folder across the desk. Enrollment papers, tuition paid, start date circled in pen. He didn't frame it as charity. He didn't make a speech. According to the family member who later described the moment, Wayne said something close to this: "You're going to school. That's settled. What you do after that is up to you." Roberto didn't speak. Consuelo, standing in the doorway, put her hand over her mouth. Wayne stood up, picked up his hat, and walked out of the room. That was it. No cameras, no press release, no phone call to his publicist to make sure the right people heard about it. The transaction, if you could even call it that, was done. And as far as Wayne was concerned, it was private. Within the week, Roberto was enrolled. Within the month, he was attending classes. Within the year, according to people who knew the family, he had stopped thinking of school as something happening to him and started treating it as something that belonged to him. Wayne never brought up again. Not to Roberto. Not to Consuelo. Not to anyone on his staff or in his circle who might have carried the story to a columnist or a reporter. He just kept coming home, kept asking Consuelo how things were going, kept nodding when she said Roberto was doing well. That was enough for him. But what no one knew, not even Consuelo, was that Wayne wasn't finished. Not even close. Here's what nobody knew until 1997. After Wayne passed away in 1979, his personal assistant was helping the family sort through decades of private correspondence. Tucked inside a plain manila envelope, filed with no label, no explanation, was a stack of receipts and a single handwritten note in Wayne's hand. It wasn't addressed to anyone. It simply read, "The boy deserved a chance. Everybody does." Beneath it, 12 years of tuition receipts. Every payment, every semester, logged by hand, in Wayne's own writing, as if he needed to keep track for himself. He never told a soul. Roberto started school in the fall of 1967. He was 16, older than most of his classmates, and he knew it. He carried that awareness the way kids from hard backgrounds often do, like a weight and a fuel at the same time. He didn't waste a single semester. By the time Wayne passed away in June of 1979, Roberto had not only finished school, he had gone further. College, a degree, a career that put him firmly in the middle class his mother had spent her entire working life trying to reach from the outside. He had a family of his own by then, a home, the kind of stability that doesn't happen by accident. It had started with a folder on a desk and a man who didn't wait to be asked. But here's what the simple version of this story leaves out. Wayne's involvement didn't end with the tuition check. Over the 12 years between that Thursday evening in 1967 and his death in 1979, Wayne quietly maintained what could only be described as an informal guardianship over Roberto's progress. Not intrusive, not controlling, but present. He asked Consuelo for updates, real ones, not reassurances. When Roberto hit a rough patch in his second year of school, struggling academically and privately considering dropping out again, Wayne found out. He didn't call a meeting or deliver a motivational speech. He simply had Consuelo tell Roberto that the tuition was paid through graduation regardless, that there was no financial reason to quit, that the only question was whether Roberto wanted it. Roberto stayed. When he graduated, Wayne sent a card. No fanfare. Just a card, handwritten, that Roberto's daughter later described as short, direct, and exactly what you'd expect from him. It acknowledged the work Roberto had done, not the help Wayne had given. That distinction, she said, meant everything to her father. Over those 12 years, Wayne's total financial contribution to Roberto's education came to an estimated $40,000, a figure that, adjusted for inflation, represents well over $300,000 today. He absorbed it quietly, categorized it nowhere publicly, and mentioned it to no one outside the arrangement. There was no tax benefit, no naming opportunity, no moment where Wayne could have pointed to Roberto's success and claimed any part of it in public. He just paid, and showed up, and kept asking how the boy was doing. Consuelo worked for the Wayne household until Wayne's illness made the old routines impossible to maintain. By every account from people who knew the family during those years, the relationship between her and Wayne had long since moved beyond employer and employee into something that didn't have a clean category. Mutual respect, genuine affection, the kind of bond that forms when one person sees another person clearly, over many years, and keeps showing up anyway. When Wayne was diagnosed with cancer in the mid-1970s, Consuelo was one of the small circle of people outside his immediate family who knew early. She didn't talk about it publicly. Neither did he. That was the nature of what they had built, a loyalty that ran in both directions and didn't require an audience. And when Wayne died on June 11, 1979, Roberto was 30 years old, established, and carrying something he hadn't fully put into words yet. He would spend the next 18 years trying to find the right way to say it. In 1997, he finally did. In 1997, 18 years after Wayne's death, Roberto sat down and wrote a letter. He addressed it to Wayne's son, Michael, by then the keeper of much of his father's legacy and correspondence. Roberto had thought about writing it for years, he said, had started it more than once and stopped, not because he didn't know what to say, but because he wasn't sure anyone would believe him. He wasn't a public figure. He had no photographs with Wayne, no documented relationship, no proof of anything except a life that had gone differently than it should have. He sent the letter anyway. In it, Roberto described the Thursday evening in 1967 in detail, the duffel bag, the hallway, the single question Wayne had asked him. He described the folder on the desk, the start date circled in pen, the card Wayne had sent at graduation. He described his mother's face in the doorway and said he had never, in 30 years, been able to think about that moment without feeling it all over again. Then he wrote something that Michael Wayne later called the most striking passage in the entire letter. Roberto said that for years he had assumed Wayne had done it out of fondness for Consuelo, that it was, at its core, something done for her, a gesture toward a loyal employee. It was only when his own son turned 16, Roberto wrote, and he found himself watching the boy move through the world, that he understood it differently. He saw me, Roberto wrote, not my mother's son, me, and he decided that was enough of a reason. Michael Wayne wrote back. In his reply, he told Roberto about the manila envelope, the receipts, the handwritten note, the 12 years of payments logged in his father's hand. He told Roberto that until the personal assistant found that envelope in 1979, no one in the family had known the full extent of what Wayne had been doing. Not his children, not his closest friends, just Wayne, and a plain manila envelope filed with no label. Roberto's letter and Michael's reply have been held by the Wayne family ever since. They are not on public display, but family members who have seen both letters describe Roberto's handwriting as unsteady in places, the kind of unsteady that doesn't come from age, but from trying to hold something large inside a small number of words. Wayne's note, The boy deserved a chance. Everybody does. Sits with those letters today. 12 words. $40,000. 12 years. One life, redirected completely. And not one headline. John Wayne didn't do this for headlines. He did it because when he looked at a 16-year-old boy standing in a hallway with a packed duffel bag, he saw something worth saving, and he was in a position to do something about it. That was the entire calculation. Nothing more complicated than that. We live in a world that rewards visibility, where generosity is performed for cameras, charity is announced in press releases, and kindness is measured in likes. Wayne operated by a completely different set of rules. The value of what he did wasn't in the recognition. It was in the doing. 12 years of quiet, consistent, unannounced showing up for a kid who had no claim on him and no way to repay him. He just decided the boy deserved a chance. And then he made sure he got one. So here's the question I want to leave you with today. In your life, right now, not someday, who is standing in the hallway with a packed bag? Who is one decision away from a completely different life and happens to be close enough that you could be the one who says, "Give me a week"? You don't have to be John Wayne to do what John Wayne did. You just have to notice, and then decide that noticing is enough of a reason to act. If this story hit you, do me a favor. Drop a comment with one word that describes what Wayne did. I read every single one. And if you want more stories like this, the ones history quietly buried and Hollywood never made into movies, hit subscribe. We post every week, and this is exactly what we do here. Roberto's letter is still with the Wayne family today. He's in his 70s now, and somewhere out there are his children and their children. A whole branching future that traces back to one Thursday evening, one packed bag, and one man who decided that was enough of a reason to stop. Legends aren't made on screen. They're made in the choices no one sees. See you next time.